Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karlo Abadines, the Advocacy Officer of the Catholic Educational Association of the Philippines, and I will be your moderator for today. This is the third of the first leg of the SEAP webinar series. Last Monday, we had a session on school continuity planning, and then last Tuesday, we had a back-to-back session on revisiting school fees and online enrollment. Today, our session is going to be on legal matters and government issuances. Before we proceed, let me give a few reminders to all of us here in the audience. First, as the talk is ongoing, you may post your question at the comment section of this Facebook page. We will be asking these questions during the question and answer portion. Second, please be informed that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. The link will be posted in the comments section later and will be available online until 5 p.m. today, June 11, 2020. Again, it will only be posted there only until 5 p.m. today. We encourage you to answer the evaluation form and you will expect to receive your certificate of attendance until Wednesday next week. So we shall now proceed straight into our webinar. I'm sure all of us are excited to understand better the various legal issues and government pronouncements which affects the education sector. To give us the webinar dubbed Everything Matters, Legal Issues and Government Issuances Relating to COVID-19, we have invited our SEAP Legal Counsel, Atty. Faye Risonar-Bello, to enlighten us. Other than being SEAP's legal counsel, Atty. Faye Risonar-Bello is also the Assistant to the President for Research and Advocacy in Ateneo de Davao University. Please join me in welcoming Atty. Faye. Ayan, virtual palakpak.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Greetings from Davao City. My thanks to the CEAP in partnership with RACSO for making this webinar on legal issues affecting schools in the time of COVID-19 possible. My talk shall be centering around some of the common questions involving schools during the time of this quarantine period. I will likewise try to address some of the questions raised by some parents, administrators, and teachers regarding the operations of the schools, as well as some common issues affecting schools as a workplace. So without any further ado, let's begin. Of course, the first question that would really come to mind is whether schools can survive in this time of COVID-19. As we all know, prior to COVID, schools already faced a myriad of challenges. For one, you had the implementation of the K-12 law, as well as the transition period that came along with it. Because of K-12, schools had to adjust by improving on their infrastructure, upskilling their teachers, training its teachers to accommodate the additional 2 years, as well as to brace for the impact of the full implementation of K-12, anticipating that there will be no enrollment in the college level for 2 years. These were the things that schools had to prepare. Schools were likewise faced with the disappointing results of the PISA survey, the performance of our schools in the recent PISA survey. So they had to reevaluate about the effectiveness of the teaching methodologies. For private schools in particular, may dagdag pa ng mga challenges. Like private schools always had to address with every year the massive migration of teachers to the public school sector. This is brought about by the salary increases of public school teachers owing to the salary standardization law. And because of the attractive salary packages, more private school teachers are enticed to move to the public school sector. Not that that is necessarily a bad thing, but its unfortunate effect is that the private schools are left in a bind as regards to continuity of the instruction that of their teachers, the training of their teachers. You have trained these teachers for several years or so, only to be left in the lurch because they decide to move or to transfer to the public sector rather. So these were some of the concerns. You also had the uneven implementation of the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, that the private school sectors had to monitor closely whether or not the provisions applicable to the private sector were also fully implemented. So these were the concerns that private schools were facing. And then you had the COVID. COVID came and it completely put an abrupt halt to school operations. This COVID-19 crisis, which has caused and is still causing the loss of lives and disruption to our economy, has compelled government to readjust its priorities, putting health and safety first and foremost of the constituents, but relegating all other concerns in the background. So even in education is placed in the back seat. Can we say that government has no basis to do that? Of course, that's not correct, because government is just exercising its police power, the police power of the state. And by police power, I don't mean the power of the police to go around and arrest criminals and so on and so forth. But this refers more generally to one of the inherent powers of a state. Briefly explained, it refers to the power of the state to pass laws that can interfere with one's personal liberty, as you have seen in the imposition of the curfew, the curtailment of travel. It can also potentially interfere with one's property, as in the case of the sequestering certain facilities so that it can be used as quarantine areas or accommodations for the health workers. For schools in particular, there was an interference to the use of property when there was a suspension of classes that practically put a cessation of the operations of the school. So these are some of the things that are manifestations of the exercise of police power by the state. A clear example of this would be the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. This law authorized President Duterte to exercise powers necessary to carry out urgent measures that would address the national emergency related to COVID-19 for a period of 3 months until this is extended by Congress. The law allowed President Duterte to realign budgets, as you will see later on in the successive slides. There were some budgets that had to be cut and some departments that had to receive these budget cuts so that other departments can receive the bigger cut of the budget. If you had the occasion to look at the guidelines of the IATF, these guidelines are just simply implementations also of the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. You can see the state fulfilling its role as parens patriae. It's simply put the obligation of the state to provide protection and to look after the welfare of its people, especially those who cannot tend to themselves. Who are these people? I'm referring of course to the minors, those who are 60 years old and above, and those with health risks. The articulations in these guidelines always place a preferential treatment for our vulnerable sector in the manner of the imposition of curfew, the restriction of travel, suspension of classes, and so on and so forth. These are just manifestations of the state fulfilling its role as parens patriae. It simply means here, parens patriae, it is the obligation, again, of the state to provide protection and look after the welfare of its people, especially those who cannot tend to themselves. In fulfilling this duty, the state may resort to the exercise of its inherent powers, in this case, the exercise again of police power. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you will see in the successive slides the budget cuts that I was referring to. pursuant to the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act, President Duterte is allowed to realign budgets. So accordingly, you would see the Department of Education's budget has been reduced by 21.9 billion. The CHED budget was likewise reduced by 13.9 billion. The budgets for state universities and colleges reduced by 7.6 billion. But you contrast that to the frontline agencies that are trying to address the COVID-19 pandemic. They have received relative increases in their budget. DOH, DSWD, DOLE, DOF, with DSWD receiving the biggest additional funds of 162 billion pesos. Now, while this is something that we can see as rational, the unfortunate side effect of it though is that the budget cut for education per se appears to be ill-timed insofar as our schools actually need the infusion of funds to assist them in the transition to alternative delivery modes of education. From the capacity building or upskilling of our teachers to procuring facilities in support of these alternative delivery modes. So what signal does it send to us, to schools in particular? It sends a signal that for the time being, we may be expecting minimal assistance from government. And it's really ill-timed because we are preparing for the coming school year. So these months, the weeks that we are doing, the successive months, for the next 2 months or so, these would entail, for most schools, preparations for the coming school year. This is when the additional funds would have come in handy. The additional assistance coming from government would have come in handy. More so, when the proposed stimulus package bill that was passed on third reading in the lower house did not pass, did not have a counterpart level in the Senate. And if ever a stimulus package bill would come out, it might take some time. So, for now, for the next 2 months or so, we might be expecting minimal assistance from government. But given all these challenges, can we say that schools, can schools really survive in the time of COVID? I really think schools can. It is a very huge challenge. But even with government assistance, it will still be a huge challenge because everything is new to us. The shift, the complete overhaul of the curriculum, the shift to alternative delivery modes. These are all gargantuan tasks. But I believe that the collaborative effort of the private education sector is, we can see it in the weeks that have transpired. While the quarantines were in effect, schools were silently preparing, slowly and silently preparing, training their people for the coming school year. So I think they've tried to come up with innovative ways to cope with and to transcend these very challenging conditions. So let's go to the next part on the common questions that are being asked relative to schools with respect to the imposition of these quarantines. Right now, we have already seen the shift from an ECQ setup to the less restrictive quarantine setup, which is the general community quarantine. So it's one step closer to the new normal. Is this better for schools? How can schools operate under these new conditions? Now, the thing that's quite also challenging for schools is that the issuances of guidelines are very fluid, considering also the nature, we're trying to address the pandemic and there are developments that are coming left and right, cases that we are hearing of left and right, and government has to respond effectively. And its effect would be issuances that might come out after 1 week. You have a new one already. The latest with respect to the omnibus guidelines on the implementation of community quarantine would be that the one that was passed recently, June 3, incorporating some of the amendments. So let's take a run through at the provisions that are applicable for schools. What are the features? Residential or face-to-face classes are still suspended for the duration of the MECQ or the GCQ, whichever is applicable in your particular area. For higher mass gatherings and non-essential work gatherings are still not allowed. For higher ed, if you are conducting or offering summer classes, midterm and or mid-year intersession, they should only be catering to the following students: graduating students who need to complete their academic requirements, to those students whose subjects are scheduled in the summer under the PSG of their degree program, and third, students taking graduate studies. And only HEIs with capability for full online learning should be allowed to conduct summer classes. This is based on the CHED Advisory 7 series of 2020. With regard to OJT and internship programs, the same advisory also provides that these internship programs remain suspended until the quarantine restrictions are lifted. But if your area is situated in an MGCQ, the HEI may conduct in-campus OJTs and internship programs provided that there is strict compliance with the health standards, minimum health standards. So, physical entry of students who are below 21 years old are not allowed to enter the campus. School personnel likewise are not allowed to physically report for work unless they belong to that category of employees whose activities are permitted in the omnibus guidelines. And these offices may only be allowed to operate at 50% capacity. The examples given here are the offices that render administrative support. For schools, this would cover offices that would prepare for billing and payroll. It could cover essential work in preparation for the coming school year, work for necessary work that is done in preparation for online enrollment or even for enrollment per se. Some allied services that are located inside the campus can likewise operate at 50% capacity, especially if they are essential to the proposed delivery mode that will be implemented rather by the school. So for example, if the mode adopted by the school is distance learning by correspondence, then the school would necessarily rely on its publishing and printing services to prepare these packets, these information packets that will be delivered to the learners. So these offices can operate at 50% capacity during the GCQ period. Bookstores, school and office supplies, if they are essential for the proposed delivery mode, may likewise operate at 50% capacity. And of course, other essential personnel like your janitorial and security services, which are necessary for the security and upkeep of your physical campus. As regards other offices or units, alternative work arrangements or work from home arrangement is highly encouraged. So the next phase is the transition from GCQ to MGCQ. If the school belongs to a region where a modified GCQ is in place, work may be allowed to resume physically or on-site and at full capacity, provided that there are alternative arrangements that you will give to your employees who are above 60 years old and above, as well as those with immunodeficiency or health risks. Mass gatherings in an MGCQ setup, mass gatherings, community assemblies, non-essential work gatherings may be allowed provided these participants shall be limited to 50% of the venue or seating capacity and that there is compliance with the minimum health standards. Now, if the school, for HEIs, if they belong to a region where an MGCQ is in place, HEIs may allow residential or face-to-face classes, subject to strict compliance with minimum health standards, consultation with LGLUs, and in compliance with the guidelines set by the CHED, especially on when classes may begin. The prohibition on mass gatherings, however, shall still be followed. For basic ed, however, the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan shall be adopted. Now, it is understood at all times in this transition from GCQ to MGCQ that there must be strict compliance with the minimum health standards prescribed by the DOH. In an MGCQ setup, the movement of persons is already permitted for any purpose other than leisure. So a question was asked before, and it has cropped up in several social media sites on whether in an MGCQ setup in their locality, can somebody already visit their girlfriend or their boyfriend? And the local chief executive mentioned that's not allowed because that's a travel or a movement of person that's purely for leisure. It's not for work. It's not for the procurement of food or medicine. So for the meantime, on hold muna ang love life. Let's go to the next part. After GCQ, the guidelines state that it's now under the categorization of the new normal. But what is this one? What is this animal known as new normal? The new normal actually refers to standards that will be institutionalized in common or routine practices, and they would remain even after the pandemic, while the disease is not fully eradicated through means such as widespread immunization. What are these standards that we have been practicing during the quarantine period that may be institutionalized in the new normal? I think this would cover the frequent hand washing, the observance of social distancing, the wearing of face masks, the temperature checks that will be undertaken whenever you enter a building. These are all protocols that may be institutionalized under the new normal. These would include actions that will become second nature to the general public, as well as policies such as bans on large gatherings that will continue to remain in force. For this, you might also want to take a look at the Better Normal for the Workplace, Communities, and Public Spaces Act of 2020. This bill already passed on second reading and is well on its way to becoming a law. If this becomes law, these measures will be effective for 3 years or shorter if the national government declares that the threat of the virus is over. Briefly, now the bill provides that it will require companies to submit a workplace management plan to LGUs detailing how many employees are allowed to work in the office and the overall strategy for the reporting of the workforce to minimize the risk of catching the virus. It will impose mandatory temperature checks, contact tracing systems, the establishment of government-operated quarantine facilities, and other existing measures to help monitor individuals who are at risk or who have contracted COVID-19. So those are the features of the proposed Better Normal for the Workplace, Communities, and Public Spaces Act of 2020. Now, we move on to the next part of my talk, the common questions being asked. The first question is, when will schools open for academic year 2020-2021? Now, some of you may already know the answer to these questions, but it might be good to go over them again. For basic ed, the Basic Ed Learning Continuity Plan shall be adopted. This means that the opening of classes shall be on August 24 and will end on April 30, 2021. This will still fall within the prescribed period mandated by Section 3 of RA 7797, which provides that the school year shall start on the first Monday of June, but not later than the last day of August. Now, for private schools, can they start earlier than August 24? The answer would be yes, provided that it still falls within the period provided for by law. So it's still within the period set by Section 3 of RA 7797. And provided that they comply with the conditions set forth in the Learning Continuity Plan, as we will see in the succeeding slide. The first condition being that the school learning continuity plan has to be submitted if you intend to open earlier than August 24. It should indicate the adoption of the learning delivery option, and there are a myriad of options. You have full online, hybrid, correspondence, radio, TV, face-to-face if allowed under the guidelines and when the local risk severity permits in your area. Definitely no face-to-face classes before August 24. And the adoption of the various learning delivery options takes into consideration the school's institutional capacity, the profile of its learners, and the local COVID risk severity classification, and in compliance with the minimum health standards. So again, if you do decide to open earlier than August 24, these are the requirements. Submission of the learning continuity plan, no face-to-face classes earlier than August 24. Face-to-face learning may be allowed only when the local risk severity grading will permit. Additional guidelines would be conduct of curricular and co-curricular activities and other similar activities is cancelled unless this is conducted online. And provided also, if the school decides to adopt an alternative delivery mode and will opt to begin earlier than August 24, they also need to inform the regional IATF in their area and the DOH regarding the school's learning continuity plan and its measures to comply with the minimum health standards as prescribed by the DOH. Now, just recently, there has been development in legislature regarding the passage of House Bill 6895, which had a counterpart also at the Senate. And because the provisions are similar, it would appear there's no longer any bicameral conference to speak of. It will proceed to Malacanang for signature. The law will will effectively amend, supposedly, RA 7797, the one which provides for when schools will begin, when schools will open. The proposed law authorizes the president to set a different date for the start of the school year when there is a declaration of a state of calamity. What is its effect under the current situation? For now, because it's not yet law, then it's still the status quo, no? Still August 24, still the DepEd Learning Continuity Plan which will be adopted. And to my mind, if and when the bill becomes law, the president will definitely take into consideration the recommendations of his alter ego, which is the Secretary of the Department of Education. And the Secretary naman of the DepEd has been very clear from the start that we will adopt the Learning Continuity Plan. August 24 for basic ed schools. If you decide to open earlier than August 24, then you comply with the provisions mentioned in the Learning Continuity Plan and with the IATF guidelines. Now, in a recent news article, I think that was posted a while back, in addition to the measures provided under the Learning Continuity Plan, the DepEd also eyes the limiting of the classroom size. The maximum number should be only 15 to 20. If and when face-to-face modality is allowed in certain schools by August, and this is on top of the existing protocols, the limiting of the classroom size is meant to comply with the physical distancing measures set by the government. So these are the things to remember if you are for basic. For higher ed naman, the IATF guidelines and in relation to the CHED COVID Advisory Number 7 provides for rolling opening of classes and will be based on the education delivery mode of the HEI, taking into consideration the HEI's compliance with minimum health standards as well as the situation on the ground. What are the local executive orders or issuances in effect? What is the capacity of the HEI? The profile of its learners. So for higher ed, HEIs with full online delivery can open anytime after May 31. For HEIs that will be using flexible learning, they can open anytime in August 2020. And if you will be using significant face-to-face, HEIs can open not earlier than September 1, 2020. So again, no residential or face-to-face classes earlier than September 1. For this purpose, all HEIs who are still using the old academic calendar, June to May, are encouraged to change their academic year and open in August 2020 or later in the year. So that ends the question on when schools will begin. We now go to the other common questions on tuition and fees, for example. The question is, can parents demand for an adjustment, reduction, or the non-imposition of the increase for tuition and other fees for academic year 2020 to 2021? Now, before I go and explain what is the usual protocol, I was informed that there is already a CHED memo concerning this, which came out last May 18, for consultations on tuition fees. Under the said memo, if your consultations took place and took place prior to the lockdown and the submissions have not been made for the proposal to increase tuition fees for the coming school year, you might need to do another consultation to explain the reasons why these are your to explain why these are the expenses of the school for the coming school year and why this would necessitate any proposals. But basically, the decision whether or not to impose any intended increase in the tuition fee would necessitate an institutional response. So let me go back to my explanation. For the coming school year 2020-2021, it presupposes the conduct of consultations prior to the implementation of these lockdowns. The submission of documents were already done, and it also presupposes that there was already an approval. For some schools, they've already done this. Prior to March even, they've already probably received the approvals for the proposal to increase their tuition fees, and they've probably already issued announcements on whether that there is a proposed increase of, let's say, 10% for the next school year. But then COVID came. So of course, schools would have to rethink. They have to discern whether or not these increases are in order and take into consideration also the requests of their parents, of the students, na kung pwede naman babaan, kung pwedeng i-adjust or i-modify ninyo ang inyong tuition and fees, considering that everyone, lahat naman naghihirap dahil sa COVID. It's not just the schools that are suffering, but also the parents. So it would necessitate an institutional response from consulting with all the stakeholders, take into consideration also the relevant laws that are applicable. You might have to go to the board, your board of trustees, and seek for approval on whether you will not implement the proposed increase in tuition and fees. Now, any proposal not to impose the increase in tuition fees would have to be agreed upon by the sectors affected, because the law is clear. 70% of income raised by increases in tuition and other fees shall be allocated to the payment of salaries, wages, allowances, and other benefits of teaching and non-teaching personnel. This 70% may even be higher if the CBA provides for a higher percentage. So there are some schools na mas mataas pa than 70% yung allocation ng income from the increase in tuition. Now, kailangan talaga na i-consult ninyo itong mga the affected employees' concerns. Kung may union handling that, the management has to really reach out and talk to the union about it. What about for the other school fees? Pwede bang babaan? Pwede bang i-adjust? Again, the answer would still be, it would necessitate, again, the institutional response and taking into consideration yung prevailing na CMO issuance about it, the one that was released last May 18, regarding consultations on tuition fee increase. I know the CAAP has been preparing suggested guidelines on the adjustment of fees, which the member schools can use in trying to manage their finances, and at the same time be responsive to the request of parents to bring down school expenses, especially since schools will now be resorting to alternative delivery modes. Yung common na complaint or concern ng mga magulang is, dahil nga, shift tayo to online, di halos wala ng gastos. Bakit ganito pa rin ang tuition fee natin? Bakit ganito pa rin yung other school fees? It might necessitate, if that is the common concern or complaint, it might necessitate another round of consultations with the parents that we are imposing, these are the rates that we are charging for the coming school year because of the new expenses that might have to be undertaken by the school as we shift to alternate delivery modes. Because there will be costs. Kahit na online nga yan, may gastos pa rin yan. Your retooling or upskilling of your faculty, for example, hindi naman yan siya libre, kinakailangan yan gastusan. The improvement of your existing infrastructure kung online yan, so kailangan mong i-upgrade ang internet systems nyo sa school. Provision, for example, of prepaid Wi-Fi kits for your students, if that is something that is within the capacity of your institution because you want to shift to online education. These are expenses that would have to be factored in. So, while some expenses can be done away with, pwede siyang ma-reduce drastically because hindi na siya ginagamit, there are some new expenses that would also have to be taken into consideration. Now, there are various permutations on what fees can be reduced or done away with. So, for example, if your school opts to shift to full online mode, there will be a significant number of fees which are dependent on public or which are assessed because these are public gatherings in a regular face-to-face class. Baka hindi na yun siya kakailanganin. So, it may be possible na tanggalin na muna siya, hindi mo na siya i-assess for this school year, like expenses for field demonstrations, for camping, kung may mga ganyan sa school ninyo, baka pwedeng hindi na yan siya i-assess for this school year. But the counterpart is, kung shift nga to full online at kinakailangan may additional na expenses na gawin, there may be new items in your school fees, na kinakailangan i-explain sa mga magulang, sa affected na sector, all your stakeholders, your students. The thing to remember though is that the proceeds from tuition fees and other school charges, as well as the other income of schools like rentals, sa concessionaires nyo, these are all considered as institutional funds under Section 44 of BP 232. Schools may pool their institutional funds in whole or in part under joint management for the purpose of generating additional financial resources. So if, for example, certain activities are no longer possible because there is no face-to-face classes that will take place, schools can utilize these fees collected from the said activities, like in training for teachers as they shift to online delivery mode. So again, if there is a proposal to slash or reduce other school fees, it would have to take these matters in consideration. So that ends the issue on other school fees. We now go to some of the common concerns or questions involving the school as a workplace. With the shift from ECQ to GCQ that now allows the entry of selected personnel as identified in the IATF guidelines at 50% capacity, schools would now be seeing the gradual entry of its employees to the workplace. How will schools prepare for that? Like any private establishment, they are encouraged to adopt strict measures in their return to work arrangements. That would mean, for instance, compliance with the joint DTI DOLE return to work guidelines, the compliance with the DOH return to work guidelines, and guidelines issued by the appropriate sector relevant national government agencies. If in your protocols for return to work, all of these are integrated, they will be considered as sufficient compliance with the minimum public health standards. Take note also that in accordance with DOH Memorandum Number 2020-0220, the testing of all returning employees of a private sector entity shall not be required as a condition precedent for their operation. In no case shall the testing of all returning workers be construed as a condition precedent for that employee's return. So, hindi mandatory on the part of the employee to submit himself to testing. For HEIs, SHED Advisory Number 7 is also specific on the return to work preparations. Like, for areas that are still under ECQ, MECQ, GCQ, and you are preparing already for the return to work arrangements, the HEIs need to prepare facilities to comply with minimum health standards, such as the provision of masks, hand washing and sanitation, physical distancing, so on, so physical distancing marks in your campus. These are all things that may need to be prepared. Consultations with local health officials and LGU to determine the health situation in your locality. The HEI might need to consult with its stakeholders to prepare the contingency and continuity plan, to adopt flexible learning strategy or mode in delivering instruction by ensuring A, the faculty delivery system, B, the faculty complement, and C, student support. And because we are already preparing for the coming school year, to adopt flexible enrollment procedures. And some of the suggestions in that advisory would include online enrollment and payment through remittance services, scheduling of students who will be allowed to enroll on any given day, the opening of satellite enrollment sites as far as practicable, and other arrangements that would limit the number of students allowed at any given time and to ensure a safe physical distance. Mass gatherings are likewise still prohibited, including graduation ceremonies, and private HEIs are advised to follow guidelines of government agencies such as DOLE in the deployment of faculty and staff. If, for example, your area is already under GCQ and you're already awaiting the termination of the GCQ, baka mag-shift na to MGCQ or baka may declaration na new normal na yung area, you would also have to prepare in your areas where there is already, if the HEA operates in an area where it's already GCQ, you're authorized to operate with the skeleton workforce exclusive for the following purposes. You accept submission for requirements for the second semester of academic year 2019 to 2020, to issue credentials to graduating students, and to prepare for the opening of classes using flexible learning modes. So kasama na din dito yung essential duties, the essential work needed in preparation for to assist in enrollment and preparations for the coming school year. To provide essential services to its clients, the assigned skeleton force cannot be the assigned skeleton workforce must be deemed to be indispensable for work and must comply with the prevailing standards prescribed by the DOH. You apply the protocols and guidelines mentioned by the DOH. Now, who shoulders the cost of COVID-19 prevention and control measures? Under Section 2 of DOLE COVID Advisory Number 18 Series of 2020, it must be the employer that shoulders the cost of the COVID-19 prevention and control measures. What are these measures? You have testing, if it is allowed, if you have the means to do so, and if the employees are willing to undergo the same. Disinfection facilities, hand sanitizers, personal protective equipment such as face masks or face shields, signages, including the preparation for proper orientation and training of workers, and the provision of information materials on COVID-19 prevention and control. The next question is, can an employer compel an employee to report for work? This is an old labor advisory, but this is still good, the good thing to remember. Under Section 3 of DOLE Labor Advisory 1 Series of 2020, employees who fail or refuse to work by reason of imminent danger resulting from man-made or natural calamity shall not be exposed to or subjected to any administrative action. The important phrase to remember here is that the employee must believe himself to be in that imminent danger resulting from the said man-made or natural calamity. Now, you can't compel them to report for work, but the employee also cannot demand that he be paid on those days na he was absent for work. Because again, we abide by the principle of no work, no pay. This would also apply for those school personnel who are not included in the category of allowed employees listed in the Omnibus Guidelines. No? So they do not report to the campus because they're not part of the skeleton workforce. No alternative work arrangements have been resorted to by the school. Is the school supposed to pay their salaries? Klaro naman that in our jurisdiction, we abide by the principle of no work, no pay. So let's say a school decides to temporarily suspend its entire operations on account of GCQ. And they don't provide for any flexible working arrangements or alternative work schemes pursuant to the DOLE advisory. The school is not obligated to pay its employees. Should they do so, no? You want to temporarily suspend your operations as a school. These schools must report their temporary closures with the appropriate DOLE regional office using the establishment report on COVID-19 prescribed under the COVID-19 Flexi Work Advisory. However, private establishments, including schools, are highly encouraged to adopt flexible work arrangements. This is meant primarily to accommodate the needs of your employers that are also trying to adjust, the needs of your employees rather, that are also trying to adjust to the adverse impact of COVID-19. So, as a gesture of solidarity with your employees, and if you have means to do so, try to adopt alternative or flexible work arrangements for them. What are the guidelines for flexible work arrangements? We need to be guided by DOLE Advisory 9 and updated by DOLE Advisory number 17. These advisories remind schools not to consider alternative working arrangements that would give rise to the obligation of schools to compensate employees fairly for the number of hours worked, even if the work is not done in the school campus. Under these advisories, there are several alternative work schemes that can be resorted to by an employer to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to accommodate also the needs of the employees to work and to receive salary for the work that they have performed. You can, for example, that's Section 3, the work from home arrangement or telecommuting work arrangement under DOLE 17, Advisory number 17. Establishments are, when feasible, highly encouraged to adopt work from home or implement telecommuting arrangement pursuant to Department Order number 202 Series of 2019. Employees on work from home or telecommuting arrangement shall be provided with adequate support by management to perform the assigned task or job. But what are the permutations in these alternative work schemes or arrangements? You would have the transfer of employees to another branch or outlet of the same employer. So with respect to schools, it might be a transfer of an employee to another unit. So from the basic ed, pwede siyang i-transfer to higher ed or so on and so forth. No? Higher ed, lipat sa basic ed. The assignment of employees to other function or position in the same or other branch or unit. The reduction of normal work days per day or week. Under the reduced work hours or work days arrangement, the employees will continue to receive their salaries, although it will be reduced in proportion to the reduction of work hours or work days. For such employees, the hours worked shall continue to be governed by the principles on working time, under the labor code such that an employee is considered to be working for all the hours they are required to give the employer while they are on duty, when the employer is suffered or permitted to work, as well as the time when the employee is considered as on call. But the period of the reduction of work hours or work days shall not be paid. Apart from the reduction of work hours, you have job rotations. A rotation program is when employees are alternately provided work within the work week. This arrangement would allow an employer to maintain its operating hours during a work week but with reduced productivity due to the reduction of the number of employees present. Now, if you do decide to resort to these alternative work schemes, transfer, assignment of employees, reduction, job rotation, or other feasible work arrangements, the thing to remember is that you need to be careful that it does not violate the principle on non-diminution of benefits. How is that avoided? For as long as the resort to the flexible work arrangements is consistent with the DOLE Labor Advisory on flexi work arrangements, this has been previously reported to in your regional office, the DOLE. Now there's the submission of your establishment report, and provided, and this is the important thing, provided that the employer has secured the consent of the employees, the written consent of the employees, then there is no violation of the non-diminution of benefits na principle. So this is the example of the establishment report template. If you are an employer and you decide to adopt an alternative work scheme or a flexible work arrangement, you are obliged to notify the appropriate DOLE regional office by submitting this establishment report on COVID-19. So kasama dyan, no, if you are working from home, an employee engaged under a work from home arrangement is therefore entitled to receive full pay for a full day's work. The next question is, may an employer ask an employee to go on forced leave? The use of leaves by employees. Leave benefits would allow employees actually to be absent from work without incurring any reduction in their pay or any penalty. It is to be construed as a right owing or belonging to the employee, and therefore it is only the employee that can decide to avail, when to avail of the same. You cannot, as an employer, insist that the employee take a forced leave, take a leave with pay. Otherwise, considering nga siyang forced leave, hindi siya pwede. Only the employees will decide whether or not they will use their leave credits. If they do so, they are guided by DOLE Labor Advisory number 11. The leaves of absence during the community quarantine period shall be charged against the employee's existing leave credits, if any. On the grant of other benefits, if the question that is always asked is an employer obligated to provide other benefits or allowances which are granted on top of the employee's salaries for the duration of the flexible work arrangement? In the event that the employer seeks to modify the grant of other benefits or allowances which are granted on top of the employee's salaries for the duration of this flexible work arrangement, it is important to consider whether these benefits or allowances have already become a company practice, or it is already contractually stipulated, meaning it's already placed in your employment contracts or specifically mentioned in the CBA. In such cases, any reduction of these benefits or allowances while the employees are on flexible work arrangements must be consented to and agreed upon between the employer and the employee, consistent with the rule on non-diminution of benefits. And as basis, please be guided by Labor Advisory number 17. Section 5 thereof states, the employers and employees will agree voluntarily and in writing to temporarily adjust their wage and wage-related benefits as provided for in existing employment contracts, company policy, or collective bargaining agreements, provided that this adjustment should not exceed 6 months or the period stipulated in the CBA, if any is provided. After such period, the employers and the employees may review their agreement and renew the same. Next question is, should an employer pay an employee 13th month pay during the quarantine period? Actually, there is no legal requirement for employers to advance the whole or prorated 13th month pay of its employees in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. But, heeding the call of the President of the Philippines in his various media pronouncements before, employers, especially the big establishments, may, as an exercise of their managerial prerogative, grant its 13th month pay to employees in advance, whether in whole or prorated, as a means of mitigating the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next question that is being asked, are employees entitled to hazard pay? Unlike our government counterpart, where the rules on hazard pay have been explicitly provided for in relevant circulars, there is no such rule for private establishments to provide hazard pay for employees reporting during the quarantine period. Other questions like this one. Can an employer place an employee on floating status? Apart from rotations, reduction of the work hours, assignment, temporary assignment to another unit or another branch, this is also one managerial prerogative na pwedeng i-exercise, no, ng company to place an employee on floating status. It is allowed for as long as it does not exceed a period of 6 months, because this is only meant to be a temporary displacement of the employees, and provided that the conditions in the labor code are complied with. Meaning, at the end of your 6-month period, dapat i-recall mo na, tawagin mo na balik ang employees mo to report to work without prejudice, no, without loss of their seniority rights. If they are not called back to work, it is considered already as constructive dismissal. Hindi mo sila pabalikin. Verily, this floating status would require the dire exigency of the employer's bona fide suspension of operation of a business or undertaking. So, those are the requirements in the labor code. There has to be a bona fide suspension of operation of a business or undertaking, and there is a dire exigency. That is why you would need to put your employees on floating status. If those are not complied with, it might be considered or perceived as constructive dismissal kung walang compliance sa mga conditions mentioned under the labor code. Can schools defer payment of employees' membership contributions such as the SSS, PhilHealth, and Pag-ibig during the quarantine period? In the previous months, yung ECQ, March and April, a moratorium was actually issued by these agencies. But after May 31, 2020, it would seem na wala nang new issuances regarding extensions, no? Or the extension of the said moratorium. It might be good also to simply comply with the payment. Otherwise, matatamaan na naman ang school sa penalty for the late payments of these membership contributions. Besides, if an employee contracts COVID-19 in the course of his employment, despite the exercise of due diligence on the part of schools, not to observe the minimum health standards prescribed, kakailanganin niya yung PhilHealth niya na benefits, no? Because the PhilHealth also provides for benefits owing to COVID. So better keep these membership contributions up to date for the benefit also of your employees. Now, the next question would be on the financial survival of schools post-quarantine. In the recent quick survey prepared by the COCOPEA and the CEAP, most schools have admitted that it may no longer be able to provide for the salaries of its teachers after May 2020, especially considering that no tuition income can as yet be collected for the months that the school goes on its summer break, unless of course these schools will provide online summer classes. So after GCQ, what can the schools do? Some suggestions would be to consider shifting to online enrollment mode as soon as possible in those areas applicable, because if you do decide to go online enrollment, then tuition collection is also expedited. You can also consider utilizing the lending program offered by the Land Bank under the Access to Academic Development to Empower the Masses Towards Endless Opportunities lending program. For this, the bank has allotted a total program fund of 3 billion in credit support for private high schools, private technical and vocational education training institutions, as well as higher education institutions such as colleges and universities to provide continuing education to their students. You can also consider asking for help in the form of donations or gifts from alumni and corporate friends. These donations, when pooled together, can even be given to to floating status or displaced employees as a form of subsidy. As a bonus for these corporations, they can advance the theory that these donations can be written off as tax deductions for them. One innovative project undertaken by a school was a social media fundraising campaign aimed to provide subsidy to its minimum wage earners during the COVID-19 crisis. In a span of, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, they were able to raise a significant amount and they were able to distribute it to the displaced workers. The amount was not that big, but at the very least, may nabigay ding ayuda kahit papano. And of course, in all of these challenges, it is best to engage your affected employees, or even your stakeholders, in constant dialogue. So, talk to the parents, talk to your students, talk to your teachers, to your affected employees on what are the best ways to move forward in order for schools to operate well, to operate fully, without the least possible harm, the least possible injury, the least possible harm, the least possible damage. It is only through dialogue that you can come out with best solutions to move forward. As a last resort, you can consider trimming non-essential personnel on account of, for example, redundancy or retrenchment. These are all valid. These are all just or authorized causes, no? A valid exercise of your managerial prerogative, or as really a dire super last resort, to resort to temporary business closures. In a recent, I think, in today's news, the Dolly reports over 2,000 companies already that have undergone temporary closures or have resorted to redundancy or retrenchment. It's a dire situation, and we would see this also in schools, no? I think a few weeks ago, there were already several CEAT schools that have announced their closure on account of the crisis brought about by COVID-19. But schools must be guided that employees may be dismissed from their employment on account of these authorized causes, just or authorized causes for termination under the Labor Code. You have business closure, redundancy, or retrenchment. To do so, you have to comply with the substantive and procedural requirements for authorized cause dismissal. This would include the requirement to give notice of termination to both the employee and the appropriate DOLE office within 30 days from the date of the termination of employment, and the payment of the appropriate separation pay to your employees. And I would leave it up to the institution to determine, no, kung ano tong mga non-essential personnel. Like for some, because they will be shifting to full online education, there will really be some personnel na consider na as a measure to conserve finances. There will be retrenchment. There will be a laying off of employees on account of redundancy. Let's say if there will be no actual physical education classes because classes will be conducted via online or distance learning, some coaches or instructors may be regarded or categorized as non-essential personnel. It's a sad reality, but those are the things that a school would have to face, and these are hard decisions that school administrators would have to be facing. What are the other concerns? As some schools will be transitioning into online delivery modes, they would be relying on third-party applications, and this poses also another source of concern. Like, what are these third-party applications? You have Google Meet, or the most common right now for meetings is Zoom. It is important that we be made aware of the risks attendant to the use of these third-party applications. Zoom, for example, there has been a recent news article on the web about the Zoom being vulnerable to Zoom bombing, like photo bombing, where in the course of an online meeting, someone hacks or Zoom bombs a meeting and inserts a video or a file. And the most offensive ones are usually porn videos being inserted in Zoom online meetings. For learners in the basic ed especially, that will be exposed to online learning, this is where the presence of a responsible adult who can monitor the safety of the online space becomes all the more important. It will become challenging as well for the responsible parent, the responsible adult rather, who will be monitoring the online education of the child. Because what if in your family setup you are a two-income household, both parents would need to go to work? So who will be the designated responsible adult then to monitor the online education of your child? So these are questions that are valid and legitimate. Second, there is also a greater risk for phishing incidents and identity theft when one resorts to online transactions. In online enrollment, for example, sensitive data could be transmitted. For example, your credit card account for payment purposes. It is important in this regard to constantly update your systems and processes so that these risks can be minimized. And finally, while some schools may be ready to transition to online learning, are the learners also ready? Is the manner by which online delivery will be done or to be implemented something that is acceptable, or something that is in accordance also with the developmental issues concerning developmental issues that need to be taken into consideration when you resort to online learning. This is applicable especially for the younger learners, where there have also been studies that would show that prolonged use of screen time poses developmental problems. So these are matters that the educators also have to take into consideration in the shift to online learning. How long should an online session be for the younger learners? And how effective would this shortened time be to extract, to impart the competencies that are needed? Apart from that, of course, you also have to ask, apart from the readiness of schools to resort to online learning, apart from the developmental issues, physically or logistically, do the parents now have the gadgets also to provide for their children as they shift to online learning? Meron ba silang financial means to procure these gadgets necessary for online learning? Kung wala, how can schools assist the parents in procuring these gadgets? Would the school be able to assist the learner in finding ways to procure these gadgets at minimal cost? Like, can you ask your partners na mag-offer ng significant discounts sa mga learners ninyo? These are some of the suggestions. And finally, assuming that schools and students are ready for online learning, are our telcos, no, our telecommunication companies, ready to accommodate this new normal of teaching? There are no easy solutions to the myriad of problems that private schools are facing these days. Looking for creative solutions, however, would require continuous dialogue with all the affected stakeholders. It is my hope, however, that my talk, however short it is, somehow helped you. My deepest appreciation to the following people who have made this possible: to RACSO and to CEAP, to the very supportive people from Atty de Davao University. So I will have to name them specifically because they've been tremendous help to me. Mr. Bernie Heresa, our ICOMP director, Attorney Jet Pasqua, our tertiary level registrar, Attorney Nice Solis, our HRMDO director, Mr. Jeremy Eliab, our executive vice president, for all the inputs you have given in polishing this talk. To the executive director of COCOPEA, Attorney Erap Estrada, for the insights that you have imparted in your lecture on education law in the time of COVID. To the members of the Board of Trustees of the CEAP under the leadership of Father Elmer Dizon, for the inputs that you have shared in our discussions in our previous meetings. To Karlo Abadines, our advocacy officer in the CEAP, for the additional inputs. And finally, to my mentor, Father Joel Tabora, our ADU president, for introducing me to the world of education law and advocacy. This webinar content would not have been possible without all of your help. As I do not claim to be an education law expert, I got all of these insights from you all. Maraming salamat at magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
So thank you, Attorney Faye. That was an amazing talk, and I'm quite sure a lot of people were able to gain a lot of knowledge as abang nangyayari yung talk nyo. Talagang minonitor namin yung questions, and marami na mukhang dumarating na. So again, welcome to the questions and answer portion of this webinar. Again, before we proceed, may I just remind everyone again that you will receive the certificate of attendance only upon completion of the evaluation form. No? So I believe that the link to this evaluation form has already been posted in the comment section of this page. So please check out the comment section, look for the link of the evaluation form, and please fill it up if you're interested in getting the certificate of attendance. No? So this link will only be available until 5 p.m. today. No? So 5 p.m. today, June 11, 2020. So we encourage you to answer this so that you will also receive your certificate of attendance for today's webinar. No? So as we continue on with this question and answer section, I'll be inviting everyone to continue posting your questions. We'll be monitoring them and we'll be asking the questions. No? But I guess we can already start since there's already been a number of questions that came out po, in that. No? So ready na po ba kayo, Attorney Faye? Yes. Okay, sige. So, our first question, no? So let's start with some general questions and then maybe we can go into some specifics. No? So this came from Nerissa Tan. What is the difference between a memorandum and an order? What are the consequences for an employee that an employee will face for not following either of the two?
Oh, Napaka-controversial. But generally speaking, usually kapag memorandum, no, it's more of a reminder or a communication addressed to an employee. So, syempre, merong directive to comply. Yung order naman, medyo mas mandatory yung ano niyan, yung tenor at ang dating ng ano na yan, ang correspondence na yan. But both, of course, if they emanate from your superior, it necessitates meron ka ding compliance, no? Kasi naman these memorandums, these issuances, these orders were promulgated, they were issued for the benefit naman din of the employee concerned or the agency concerned. So, para na lang walang gulo, sundin na lang din natin.
Yeah, sige. The next question, so this will be quite a fast one, no? So is there a possibility, this came from Chanda Kipilano, so is there a possibility daw that face-to-face education can actually happen on September? Is this possible?
In the previous na mga press conferences that we have witnessed, no, coming from the education heads, no, from Sec. Liling Briones and from Chair Popoy de Vera, sinabi naman nila na itong September 1 na date that was mentioned would have to take into consideration yung area concerned. So like if in your area, it is classified as a COVID low risk severity classification niya, meaning wala talagang COVID incident, zero COVID incident. And then if you have consulted with your LGU about it, if the LGU likewise agrees with it, if you have submitted your continuity plan with the LGU, with your regional IATF, and provided that there is very strict compliance with the minimum health standards, no, as issued by the DOH, there is a likelihood na pwede naman ang face-to-face. But if it were personally, no, dahil nanay din ako, pag may marinig akong ganyang face-to-face, tapos sa area ko hindi naman talaga low risk, I would not also recommend that. I would be one of those who will be sending correspondences na hindi low risk tayo, hindi magandang option ang mag face to face.
Yun. I think it's clear, no, na when we try to assess, even when the government is assessing, the context of our localities are very different, no? In a sense, iba yung mga risk, mga risk levels in different areas in terms of exposure to, and I think that's where the dependence will come in. But I think what's emphasized nga is we should be dialoguing and talking at least to our local governments, no, because they would actually know also kung ready na ba yan, etc. But mukhang may possibility naman, but I think this is an evolving conversation, no, Atty.
Yeah.
Sige po. There's also a question, no, from Suor Marinor DSD. If we will open the school on August 24, do we still need to submit, no, our learning continuity plan, no? And maybe, Attorney, you can comment also because I think CHED also has certain, I don't know, when it comes to the learning continuity plan.
Yung learning continuity plan naman, parang naging mandatory talaga siya that you submit early if you plan to open earlier than August 24 because syempre these agencies would also like to know how you will proceed, how you will go about in delivering your how you will implement your alternative delivery modes, and they would like to see ano yung mga protocols nyo to comply with the minimum health standards. But I think even if you do decide to open on August 24, the submission of the learning continuity plan will also be asked of you just so that these agencies would know where you are going, how you will implement your alternative delivery mode, and to see also if there is substantial compliance again with the health standards na in place, set in place by the IATF and by the DOH. So,
all right. Thank you. There's another one that was asked, no, from Southern Leyte. Do we need to ask permission from LGU if may modified graduation na gagawin sa school namin?
Definitely, baka may executive order pa sa area nila na banning on-site na graduation. Virtual ba sabi? Sorry. Virtual graduation. Kung virtual, hindi
walang nakalagay eh. Modified graduation daw. I don't know what that would be.
Ang hirap ng description. Kasi kung meron niyang may physical presence, baka pagbabawalan pa kayo ng inyong LGU niyan, lalo na kung high risk ang area nyo. Pero virtual graduation ceremonies, hindi naman siguro kailangan ng prior consent from your LGU. It's the physical presence of the students in the campus natin binabantayan because there is still the prohibition on mass gatherings.
Correct. Okay. Sige po. Thank you. Maybe we can dive in to a few of the questions regarding fees, no. Alam naman po natin naging problematic to how do we adjust the fees, di ba? If students will not come in, how do you So I guess we can tackle a number of questions that came out from the comments, no. So I guess just to start this off, this came from Adrian Bigay. Sabi po niya, Attorney, is it right for the school to disclose the assessment of fees and its breakdown? Or is it our right as private institutions to keep it confidential, especially the breakdown of incidental fees?
First and foremost, hindi naman ata dapat natin i-consider yan na confidential information because as in every school year, if schools intend to increase their tuition and fees, they always send a letter of intent or they apply before the CHED or before the DepEd about their proposal to increase their tuition and other fees. Kasama dyan sa requirement is the requirement of consultation with the stakeholders affected. So, meron na talagang previous disclosure niyan of your tuition and other fees. And in the spirit, I guess, considering the current context na everyone is trying to survive itong economic crisis brought about by the COVID, parang kinakailangan ata ng community effort. So kung ang schools nangangailangan ng ganitong klaseng amount by imposing these sort of fees for the coming school year, they would have to explain that to the parents, to the students, na ito ang kakailanganin natin para ma-deliver natin yung education for this coming school year. No? Let's say online, ano ang mga expenses that the school will need? So they will have to explain that further. And you might also be guided by the recent memorandum, I think, issued by the CHED chairperson. It was issued last May 17 regarding this, na on applications for tuition fee increases, you might need to conduct another consultation. Kung may consultations na nangyari prior to the lockdown or it was put to a halt, hindi natapos, dahil nagkaroon ng lockdown, kailangan nyo ulit na mag-conduct ng consultations to explain to them ito yung adjusted na fees ninyo and your justifications why this has to be done. So in all those aspects, mukhang hindi talaga treated as confidential na data itong ating tuition, ang assessment ng tuition and other fees. In the spirit of transparency, kinakailangan na alam niya ng ating parents, ng ating mga estudyante kung saan napupunta din yung tuition fee na kinokollect natin as private schools.
Yeah, I think even in previous webinars that was organized by SAYAP, I think the emphasis has always been to dialogue, to dialogue, talk to your stakeholders, explain it. I think it's a much safer option for us to be talking to the ones who will be paying, I guess, in that sense, right? To explain really the situation that schools are going through, so that it's a collaborative effort that we build together in this. Yeah. Sige po. So I think there are certain questions that's more related to a certain extent to the teachers and even the employees of schools. So I think there was a big part of your presentation was also, but I think there are some questions that are being raised here. So one of this comes from Emmanuel Cañares. Ang tanong po niya, can teachers ask allowance to cater to home-based online classes? Consequently, will it be charged to the parents? So like acquiring essential equipment, internet connection, broadband, electricity consumption. So will the schools be compelled also to give allowance in that sense?
Ang term na compel, parang medyo allergic siguro tayo ngayon,
Yeah.
Kasi ang schools naghihirap na nga. But maybe for that kind of scenario, it would necessitate, again, as you've previously mentioned a while back, Karlo, it would necessitate dialogue ng management at saka ng parents. How do we go about this? there are certain needs that need to be addressed. Can the parents also contribute? But you cannot compel the parents to pay kasi nga, ano na din eh, hirap na din yan sila, no? They're also trying to survive. They're also still trying to make ends meet. Even ang issue ng payment ng tuition, i-request nila na pababaan pa ang tuition and other fees, no? And the schools all over the Philippines, the CAP schools in particular, they've been scrambling, trying to find ways kung paano pa ma-reduce, no? Anong pwedeng permutation, anong pwedeng formula ang gawin ng isang school para lang hindi masyadong mahal ang tuition fee na i-assess sa mga estudyante for the coming school year. So maybe it's something that the institution can do. They can talk to the parents about, but compel, it might not be something that is feasible.
Yeah, okay. Sige po. But can the teachers ask allowance, or is that also part of the conversation with the, I guess, the employers?
Teachers can ask that kind of allowance, no? Baka nga ang management mismo can take that initiative na, okay, dahil may shift to online, let's look for ways kung paano matulungan, kasi nakalagay din yan sa diba, sa DOLE advisory, that you have to look for ways on how to assist in a work from home arrangement. Na-mention yun sa paper advisory. So that might mean the school has to look for kung problema ang Wi-Fi gadgets, no? So the school can look for ways na i-procure yung gadgets na yan for the teachers, maybe even for the students, no? Kung financially capable naman ng schools, to assist the students procure that. Kung hindi naman kayang bilhin ng school, then maybe to look for ways na hindi masyadong mabigat ang pag-purchase ng gadgets na yan ng mga estudyante.
Alright, sige po. So there's another question related to employees, no? So there was a question, if the employees are placed to reduction of work days, reduction of work hours in that sense, will their SSS, pag-ibig, and even their contributions to bigger associations, will it be reduced in that sense?
I would not know about yung sa membership contributions nila dun sa ibang organizations. But with respect to SSS, PhilHealth, and pag-ibig, that's assessed on a monthly basis. It's not dependent on the number of hours worked by the employee. So hindi contingent ang reduction of work hours or work days sa amount. Fixed na kasi yan ng agencies na yan. Besides, during the ECQ, during the lockdown period, issue naman ng moratorium ang mga agencies na ito on the collection of this of these monthly contributions. Pero dahil papasok na din tayo, no, nasa GCQ tayo, and then moving into the phase na after GCQ, wala tayong naririnig pa na latest issuances on extensions ng moratoriums unless na merong bagong Bayanihan Act na ipapasa na requiring these institutions to issue again moratorium, no, ng payment ng contributions. But for now, might be safer also for the schools to just comply sa pagbayad nitong membership contributions. Okay, what if, for example, one of the teachers will contract COVID during these times, tapos mas maganda na updated ang PhilHealth para naman lahat ng benefits na yung package na pwede niyang ma-avail sa PhilHealth, makukuha niya dahil updated yung kanyang payments ng kanyang membership contributions.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. So this is again questions on employment, no? So this came from Miss Caroline Maraon. Ang sabi po niya, we are not certain of our enrollment this coming school year, and teachers have already signed up a recommitment form, no? Pero wala pang job contract, but no job contract yet. What if we plan to retrench some of the teachers? What will be the rules when it comes to this?
I think that was already covered in the lecture, no kanina. Pag may retrenchment, dapat i-follow natin yung procedure laid out by the labor code, by sending previous notice to the employee concerned and to the nearest DOLE regional office, and the payment of the separation pay ng affected na employees na yan. There has to be a valid reason for the retrenchment also. So, kailangan ma-justify ni employer kung bakit i-retrench ang employee na yan. And as I mentioned also in my talk, the resort to these measures, dapat nga parang ito na yung pinaka-last resort talaga dapat.
Extraordinary.
Wala nang ibang diskarte na mahanapan ng school. And that's the time that you go to retrenchment or redundancy measures. And these are all, again, as I mentioned, valid and lawful exercise of your managerial prerogative. But yun nga it has to be weighed in. Tingnan kung necessitated pa by the circumstances. So,
I think connected to this question is the question, can an employer use last in, first out when the only option is to let go of some of the employees under probationary or even permanent status? So I guess this is extraordinary situation na kailangan mo talaga magtanggal. Can you do that? Parang last in, first out yung magiging
marami namang factors na kino-consider ang inyong human resource officer dyan sa schools. Of course, one of them is the first in, first out na policy. Pero titingnan din nila sino dyan yung regular na, sino dyan yung probie, kasi magmamatter din yan sa factors kung sino ang papasok sa list ng mariretrench. Kasama din ang performance ng employee. Let's say the school decides na we will shift to online delivery. And then you have an employee na regular, matagal na, pero medyo stubborn. Ayaw talagang mag-undergo ng training for online learning. Will you retain that employee simply because matagal na siya and weigh that against the other employee na parang nasa listahan ng retrenchment mo na maybe a few years newer siya pero willing to be trained or even yung capable or nag-undergo na talaga ng training. So those are factors na kailangan ding pag-isipan. Hindi lang talaga siya it's not just one factor na dahil probi ka una kang mariretrench. Madaming factors din na titingnan.
Okay. Thank you. Ito tanong naman po ni Ms. Sheila Manuel, is it necessary to make activity sheets just for the sake of reporting accomplishment reports every week?
Activity sheets ng teachers, for school, sa lesson plan, sa kanilang module?
Parang walang specific, pero baka I think it might be related to the teachers din, parang to report.
There has to be some form of monitoring, diba? Kung ano yung tasks na na-accomplish ng teacher for that day. Mahirap kasi mag-monitor kapag hindi kapag hindi on-site. So this will be work. I presume that if the school will go to distance or online learning, the supervision will be done remotely. Hindi yan physical na unlike sa face-to-face or residential learning na pwedeng bumisita, pwedeng mag-ronda ang isang administrator sa mga classrooms, makita niya na,
Correct.
So dito, there has to be some form of monitoring as well. And this is where documentation will come in. It comes in. It's very important. So maybe in a way that answers the question, some form of documentation is necessary just to monitor kung ano yung accomplishment ng teacher for the day.
Okay. Yeah. Ito naman siguro, Attorney Faye, I think this is more related to the institution itself, and maybe even aspects of how to relate to government. So I think the first one is, if this came from Polita Almasan, if a school closes for a year or two due to financial difficulties, will it apply for a new recognition or permit when it resumes operation, when times are better? Is that what will happen?
Let me get back to you, Anna. Pero parang ang assumption ko niyan, dahil may closure, tapos it's longer than 6 months, hindi kasi siya temporary closure lang brought about by COVID, di ba? It might be required to apply a new permit to operate dahil nagsarado talaga sila for more than 6 months.
Yeah, mukhang yeah. Okay. There's another question related naman po to hold on. In terms of enrollment naman po, so nagtatanong po dito, if parents will enroll their children for the school year 2019 to 2020 and then an EO will be released that the classes for the whole school year will be suspended, can the parents ask for refund on the payment not used?
May EO na papasa.
O parang suddenly ika-cancel yung parang classes, no? Because maybe nag-spike ulit yung COVID cases, parang ganon. How would that work
I
also?
presume this is for residential kung may face-to-face classes na nangyari sa school na yan. Kasi kung online, it's not interrupted. Online or distance learning, it's not interrupted by the issuance of any executive order kasi wala namang wala namang face-to-face na setup na mangyayari. But for face-to-face, if there will be a shift that will be adopted by that school, no, from face-to-face to distance learning, to alternative delivery modes, kung patuloy pa rin ang pagbigay ng serbisyo ng edukasyon, then there has to be some way also that the schools will be compensated. So that's where the importance of those fees come in. Kung like what happened doon sa lockdown before na nangyari mid-year sa ibang schools, they can propose adjustment of rates, but that's an institutional response. No, hindi you cannot compel DepEd or CHED to issue an order mandating schools na you do refunds. Kasi nga, iba-iba ang calendar ng ibang schools. No? For some, nagsara. At that time, nung lockdown, may iba na nagsara, tapos na talaga, nag-close na ang school year nila kasi tapos sila by March. So what's there to refund? Kasi na-utilize na din yon ang purpose for the assessment of those fees. So it will probably be an institution-based
Decision.
Decision, yes.
Right. Related again to enrollment, pero this time naman po sa mga foreign students, no? So ito kay John, galing kay John Chimezi. Please, I want to ask about foreign students enrollment for pending semester and summer semester enrollment. Is it wise for the school to keep asking for payments for both semesters?
Why the specific reference?
Whether I don't know, maybe they're stuck here, no, or something.
Whether local yan or foreign students kung necessitated ang collection dahil nagkaroon na ng classes, 'di ba? Medyo hindi ko masyado.
Okay. Sige po. There's one question, no? While we also look at we're scanning the comments also. There's one question actually that relates to digital privacy. Understandably, as we shift more into the online digital when we do education online or even blended learning and other methods, no, baka communication will increase in of course over mga chat groups, etc. So may tanong po, no, yung isa nating dito si Sir Emmanuel Cañares. Sabi po niya, is it lawful to acquire a private conversation like Messenger without the consent of all the members in the group chat for investigation purposes? So for example, screenshots, no? Parang ganun iniisip ko doon. Does the school admin have the right and need to ask permission from whoever is involved in the conversation, especially when it involves students, no? Can it be used as evidence?
Under naman sa electronic rules on evidence, kapag ang isa sa mga parties to the conversation is the one who will be utilizing the document, yung screenshot ba ng conversation or that video file, kung kasama siya, party siya doon, allowed naman yan. Pero kung outsider ka, hindi ka kasama doon sa conversation, baka doon tayo magkakaproblema. As we do move towards online learning, it might be advisable for the schools to update yung kanilang existing student handbooks, even yung kanilang administrative manuals, to consider those to update protocols with regard to online communication, to ensure na aligned siya with the data privacy laws natin, make sure that it's there are, kung hindi pa nakalista doon yung offenses, kung may violation ng cyber libel, no, yung online libel and those other applicable laws, i-update na natin kasi nga we have to adapt to the times. Kung ito na yung shift natin, dito na tayo papunta, then we have to revise our manuals or update our manuals accordingly.
All right. So this comes on a question naman po no for government support. Medyo may konting lag ata ako. So sa government support naman po when it comes to GASPE and of course ESC, DSS no. Sabi po niya good this came from Liser Francisco. Good afternoon. May I ask in terms of this pandemic, will the ESC for students still continue? And as well as the TSS for the teachers. So will government support continue even during this time of pandemic?
I'm sure the PAYAC is already there. It's the frontliner, no? It's already on top of things on how to address that concern. But I know because it's a government implemented na project, that will continue. May funds naman for that. Just have to await on yung mga announcements regarding that. There are, I'm pretty sure may government appropriations for that.
Yeah, I think it's also clear naman po, no, even within us in SEAP, working with other private school associations, we've been also having conversations with government, no, to really to really tell them also that this is the conditions, this is what's actually happening in our schools, this is the kind of support, no. So rest assured naman din po that yeah, there is really the private schools are really voicing that out to continue this subsidy programs, no, for at least continuing the education. No?
The advocacy nga to expand ang coverage ng subsidies. Like for senior high teachers, dapat masama na sila sa coverage sana ng ating subsidies na subsidy allowance for the teachers. So those are ongoing conversations that is taking place with government and these educational associations. With COCOPEA at
maybe we have a few more minutes, no, for questions. I'd like to remind everyone again, the comment section is open. You can just send in your questions, and we'll be reading it out, no, as they come in. No? So there's one parental concern, no, baka mas hindi to legal, no. Maybe from your experience also as a mother for her children. No? Ito po ay galing kay Miss Maria Glenda Suico. Sabi niya, what message or advice can you give to those parents who are skeptical, no, about letting their children continue their education and is opting to skip the school year, no? So yun, no, what advice would you give to the parents also?
As a mother pala sa lagay ko muna yung aking corona, ha, the mother. Siguro natin una nating isa-isip that education must continue, whether it is delivered by a school or it's delivered in partnership ng parents by the school. Education must continue. So that's the first principle that we have to remember. So if the parents decide to skip a school year, it's not something na parang if it's a choice ng parents. Hindi naman natin pwedeng pilitin, no, ang mga parents na kung mag-aral kayo. We're offering them, this is the alternative that we can give you in lieu of face-to-face classes. This is our alternative delivery mode. Kasi nga naman nakasaad na rin sa ating saligang batas, no, that it's the parents who exercise the natural and primary right of rearing the children, the young. So, ang primary and natural authority to decide on matters like these, on whether or not paaralin ang mga bata, if they skip classes, that belongs to the parents. The most that schools can do is to explain that this is our approach. We understand that providing education to our learners, it's an essential service. It's something that we do for the common good. So if this is the case, and because we cannot give it to you residentially or face-to-face because of COVID-19, ito ang ating alternative delivery modes. We will take into consideration ang fact na ang age ng learners, ang profile ng learners. We will also take into consideration our institutional capacity, ano ang kayang ibigay ng school. And we will keep in constant dialogue with you if you want to take part in this journey in providing your children with education for the coming school year under the new normal circumstances. But at the end of the day, it will still be the decision of the parents. So in my case, I will not speak for the rest of the parents here. I have decided na I will journey with a private school who has opted to deliver online education. And I understand also the obligation that comes with it, because the kids that I have are young learners, very young, at a young age. They would need a responsible adult. So that would necessitate time management on the part of the parents, between work hours, and the time that you have to be present for your kids' education. So judgment call talaga siya ng parents. The most that the schools can do is to explain well and to convince them na ito ang ating pwedeng ibigay para sa inyong mga anak. Remove the hat. Okay, tapos na ang aking mother talk.
Thank you, Attorney Faye. I think that was very, very good reflection for people to take, no? And even for the administrators who are listening, I think really the invitation is to give some sense of certainty, no? I think the COVID crisis has created a lot of uncertainty, and even for parents, they're not sure, no, will they send their children to school. So I think that's important in the communication plan, or even when schools communicate, diba, with their stakeholders. No, what's our plan? This is what we want to do. This is how we make sure everyone is safe. No, so I think there's also the school's role in creating that sense of certainty, no, especially for Catholic schools, diba? Parang in a time when this is problematic, people are, I think we need to give that sense of certainty, no, to those who are around us. No? So thank you, Attorney Faye. These are just some questions related to, I guess, health protocols or the laws, no, relating to face-to-face, no. So yung una ulit ay supposing in September daw, we can have face-to-face college graduation. Maybe is it possible daw to have face-to-face graduation following protocols? No, maybe this is in situations na, I don't know, sa MGCQ na or something. Is that possible?
You would have to wait for the guidelines ng IATF about this. But for now, the prohibition on mass gatherings, even in GCQ, even in MGCQ, it's still supposed to be applied. The most na nakita ko was diba, yung OJTs, internships under an MGCQ setup. Pwede siya in campus, pero dapat yung sa capacity dapat 50% of the venue capacity lang, tapos dapat may strict compliance with social distancing and other health standards, no, na protocols na kailangan i-adopt. But otherwise, yung mass gatherings, and that would even include graduation, hindi pa allowed. Antayin natin, maybe by September malalaman natin kung ano yung guidelines na i-release ng IATF.
Meron po dito isang challenging question. Sabi naman po niya, so it's clear that wala daw physical presence, but no face-to-face. What if the principal will not follow? No, what are the consequences, no, kung hindi daw sumunod yung principal sa mga rules na binibigay na?
Si principal ang hindi mag-comply.
Oo.
Adapt siya ng face-to-face.
Gusto niya mag face-to-face, for example, gano'n.
It's not just the possible legal it's not just the possible legal consequences, but the potential safety risks that will that involve. You bring employees in, you bring students in, ano yung ultimate effect niyan? Paano kung yung sa area ninyo merong COVID cases? Are you potentially going to become a hotspot ng COVID kung i-allow mo yan? At this point in time, sumunod tayo sa directive ng gobyerno din. Kasi nga, it's also an exercise of police power. Diba? It's to protect our minors, to protect those in the vulnerable sector. And marami naman dyan. Baka nga si principal, kasama siya dyan sa classification ng vulnerable sector. Baka meron siyang health risk, baka above 60 siya. Huwag siyang magtigas ulo din, di ba? Sumunod na lang din tayo.
Nice. Thank you. Maybe just towards the end, no, of our questions, I think nag-e-end na din siya. So, I guess you mentioned some of the points, no, dun sa presentation po about the bill on the new normal. Pero ano ba yung mga preparations daw? Would you have heard already of ano yung mga preparations ginagawa ng government as they craft the new normal that is to come for the country?
From what I remember doon sa new normal bill, the schools would have to craft yung parang management plan nila, and they have to submit it to their LGUs so that the LGUs can see kung may compliance ba doon sa mga institutionalized na protocols like the wearing of the face masks, the observance of social distancing measures, the conduct of temperature checks. So these are all of the things that are to be expected doon sa Better Normal Bill. Apart from that, yung, parang may nakasaad din doon na for government, they will be mandated or required to open online transactions para sa offices nila. So, kung karamihan sa mga government offices natin, kailangan ng face-to-face pa ngayon, under the new normal bill, kailangan na yan i-phase out or simulan na mag-operationalize online. So, those are some of the things na nakita ko doon sa provisions ng Better Normal Bill. The residential or face-to-face conduct of classes suspended muna until such time na a cure is found or mass immunizations can take place. And the resort should be through the delivery, the resort in of the provision of education should be by way of the alternative delivery routes. So yun yung yun yung essential features ng Better Normal Bill.
I think also, no, this is still an ongoing conversation. No, I think we have to accept the fact that everyone around the world is figuring this out. Yeah.
The fact that it's at second reading, marami pang possibilities na mangyari. A lot of things can still happen. So these are it's not just in our country; it's a worldwide concern. So hindi natin itong new normal na to. It's to be crafted. And will be crafted, and it will continue to be shaped and reshaped by looking at and observing at the circumstances around us, and by keeping in constant communication with the relevant agencies. No? Dapat may constant updating kung ano yung concerns para din mas responsive to the needs of the public. So, mga abangan ang susunod na kabanata ang natin dito.
Sige po, Attorney, as we end, would you have any final things you want to share? Maybe you can, kung gusto mo, two hats pa nga, no? The legal hat and of course the parent hat. Baka gano'n mo na yung mga gusto niyo pong i-share.
Well, I think I already said that in addressing that question. Parang the shift to the new normal, itong mga pangyayari na to, these are all extraordinary circumstances. Nobody would have expected. I did not expect that I would live in this lifetime na after ng Taal, after ng series ng lindol dito sa Mindanao, ito na namang COVID yung ating ini-experience. It's not something that I would wish upon my children, but yet here we are. So what's the most that we can do? We adapt and we try to survive. For the Catholic schools, no, especially, this is the most challenging of times. We have witnessed news about closures of some of our Catholic schools nationwide, and it's really a sad reality. And the closure of these small schools might still continue as the months will come. Dahil nga, hirap din, no? We are in an economic crisis, but what is the best thing to do right now? We move forward. No? We try to coordinate with the government agencies. We keep constant dialogue with our stakeholders so that we can devise the best way to move forward as schools. We try to adapt also to this new normal. If the directive of your school is to go online, to go distance, then we have to allow ourselves to be that resilient then. If you are a teacher, that means you have to do away with the things that you were previously used to. Ang pagtuturo the way you used to before. It has to be a different way now. Dahil nga, hindi naman pwede talaga ang face-to-face classes. For the parents, it will also entail adjustments. Maybe nga, ang pinakamadaling mag-adjust dito ang ating mga estudyante. Kasi naman, they are the digital natives, no? These are the ones who are easily adaptable. So, konting guidance lang din sa kanila kung as we journey to the new normal together, no? So the important thing is we keep constant dialogue talaga with all of these stakeholders. It's not the time to be very closed about these scenarios. To reach out, to seek for help. For the Catholic schools, the CAP has been doing its best effort to come up with means and ways to help you, from modules on preparing your continuity plan, suggested guidelines on how to adjust fees, trying to address some of your legal concerns, the conduct of these webinars. They've been trying to do the best that they can to assist the Catholic schools. So, totoong bayanihan dapat ito, hindi lang yung bayanihan in image, but totoong bayanihan in the sense na magtutulungan talaga tayo. It's a paradox, I think. Is it a paradox? By becoming online, we need to be more connected. By talking more, engaging in dialogue more. So, yeah. I guess that's how I will end my 2 cents worth.
Amazing, amazing. Digital na palakpak po, no? Kaya Attorney Faye, thank you for really sharing. And I think a lot of knowledge was imparted from this conversation. And I think maybe just 3 points, no, to take away from a lot of this beyond all the legal things. I think we just have to, the first thing is, I guess, embracing the changes. I think we have to get that into our minds, into our hearts, into our spirits, no? That change is here, no? The things that we are facing, it's extraordinary, and we have to somehow embrace it. Yung second point palagi sinasabi ni Attorney Faye is dialogue. Let's be open to talking to our stakeholders, the teachers. Let's talk to our students. Let's talk to our parents. And and something also to explore is to talk to your own governments, right? Whether it be your local government, and explore the kind of help that they can give to you. Maybe your local government is very supportive of your endeavors. We can ask them. Maybe they can give funds for continuity of learning, training of your teachers. I think that has to be part, no, of something to be explored. And I guess the last thing is also a demand for creativity. Because there are changes, I think the invitation for us as well is to see how we can change the ways that we do things, no, as a school. And even the way we collaborate, I think the invitation for us is yung bayanihan, no, that we will get through this together, no. I think that's a beautiful invitation, a call for solidarity among schools. And you can even explore, I think some people are already in the conversation of creating some form of online resources where people can share, or maybe for the higher education institutions, you can come together and build consortia, right? To collaborate and share your resources even further. No? So I think this is the opportunity to innovate. And I think that is, I believe, the invitation, no, for all of us as we move forward in this time of the COVID pandemic. No? So without further ado, I just want to thank all of you for attending. Again, please answer the evaluation form. It will be open until 5 p.m., especially if you want to get a certificate. Ayan. So, isa po ulit na palakpak sa atin pong speaker for today. And hopefully, you'll catch us again in the next webinar sessions. Maraming salamat po.